Well, good evening, and this will be installment 3 of our story for Adoption
It's
Month.
like bright on us.
We've
You have like a
got
sunbeam on you.
bright lights, so we'll slide over a little bit so we can get out of the glare.
Oh, there's sunbeam over there.
That's okay. Sunshine. It's a nice rainy day. Sorry
You
about
like
that.
an angel.
I do. It's the angel. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and maybe some folks will join us, and maybe they're not. And
There's
that's okay
Lindsay.
too.
Hey,
and
Lindsay.
we're going to leave this as generic as we can because it's going to get posted
call
to
it to
our.
my friend.
We're going to post this on our website when we're done as well. So tonight we want to kind of wrap up our talk dealing with this month and all the different things that have been taking place for the month of adoption. Thanks, babe. National Adoption Month, and Adoption Awareness Month, with the talk about adoption. So we've talked about our infertility journey, and we've talked about our loss and miscarriage, and so thought this would be rather appropriate to cap it off with some thoughts on our adoption story, since we've had a chance to be in that process a couple of times now, and maybe answer some questions that have come through, and just kind of let you know a little bit about our process.
Can I wave to my friend?
Not every process is going to be the same. So
Yeah.
I'll let Wendy go ahead and share, and I'm going to go ahead and turn some of these backdrop lights off so it's not so bright in the back.
Oh yeah, now it's like all romantic. There we go. Okay, so I have people ask me all the time, basically direction with adoption, like how to get started. And so the two things that I always tell my girlfriends is, one, you want to be on the same page with your husband. If he doesn't want to adopt, or he's not ready to adopt, or he's just not there with that, then it's not the best choice for you guys to go pursue it. You definitely want to be on board 100% together, because it's an emotional journey and it's also a financial journey. Okay. So if it's something that you feel called to, but not your husband yet, or maybe you're the husband that feels called to it, but the wife does not, then just pray that they feel called to it at the right time and that you're both ready. The second thing that I always encourage people to do once they've decided that this is something they want to do together is decide if you want to adopt domestically or internationally. Okay, so then you can kind of get yourself in one direction, and then you know from there which agencies to pursue. So that's my advice, how to get started.
And then along those lines, some of the questions you might want to be thinking about is some of the questions that you're going to get asked, maybe across from your dining room table like we were, of what part of the adoption process you're most open to, or maybe you're not open to. And this is a
For
time
home study?
to be very open
Yeah.
and honest, because they're going to ask you.
So should we talk about the home study?
We can.
Should
We'll
we
talk
kind of go in
about
order,
the
maybe?
process. Sure. So the first step for us, at least, was to find an agency that we thought would be best alignment with our values and with what we were considering for adoption. We felt called to domestic adoption here in the U.S., and we were very fond of Bethany Christian Services. But in the time before we decided on the agency, we actually did go to some meetings for several adoption agencies to kind of learn more about them and get some of their literature. And there are several fine agencies that are out there, even of different faith backgrounds or no faith backgrounds. So it's something that you would, I guess, I'd encourage you to take a look at and decide what you think is best for you and the situation where you're at, or the country that you're looking to adopt to, that maybe a certain agency specializes in that country. But there's some factors there. So first you want to decide what agency you want to use, and then connect with them to start learning what their processes look like.
And domestic adoptions are cheaper
Sometimes.
from what we've gathered,
Yep.
than international adoptions, because with international adoptions, you're paying for plane tickets sometimes twice to go out to a country. I know some of our friends have done 2 trips out to whichever country they're adopting from. So with Braden, so back in 2008 is when he was born. Cliff had just came back from his deployment, and we got a call from our social worker saying that there was a birth mom interested in us. And so in March of 2008, we got to meet Braden's birth mom. And I don't know how to describe that. Very surreal. It's like you're looking at someone who's carrying a child that could be yours, and it's just, you can't feel what she's feeling. You don't know what she's thinking. It's like your emotions are like truly all over the place, but that's why you trust your social worker. You sit down with them and have a home study with them, and that's what Cliff was talking about earlier. You sit down and they will ask you every single question, like, like literally, like, would you take a child from a rape situation? Would you take a child from a married couple? Because there are some married couples that will choose to have their children be adopted for whatever reason. And you can say yes or no to those, because they want you to be completely honest, because they are trying to pair you up exactly perfectly with the right birth mom's situation. We said we would take twins, right? With
Yep,
Braden's
we were
adoption.
open to twins.
We said we were open with twins. Now that would have been double the cost, and God would have had to, have money fall out of heaven for that one. But so in that situation, they would have paired us up with birth moms who were carrying twins. So be very specific in your home study. They want you to do that. They want you to be brutally honest about where you're at. If you're not comfortable with a certain situation to adopt from, then you say that. But yeah, so we met Braden's birth mom in March 2008. In April, he was born. So we only had contact with her for a month and only met her that one time before he was born.
It's also something to consider as far as the level of openness in the relationship you might want. Some in the older days, if you would, their mindset of adoption was totally closed, no contact with the birth family. It was basically you received a baby or a child of whatever age from an adoption agency, and
Who is this?
that was the end of the story. In today's generation, it's more common that adoption is either semi-open, meaning you have some contact with the birth parents, either at the initial stage like we did with Braden's birth mom, or further down the road you might keep an open contact with them where they might come and visit, or you might go visit them, or they might send pictures, or you might send pictures. And so for Braden's adoption, it was officially listed as a semi-open adoption. For Ella Marie's, originally that was our intent, but then after we got the chance to meet our amazing birth parents, we've actually have a very open relationship, and in fact have had them come to visit us on multiple occasions, both the birth parents, their parents, even some of the grandparents and other relatives. And it's really been awesome because we've been able to have a whole different internal look at the process of what the family looks like from the birth parents and those types of things. So for us, it's worked out very well. For some, that may not be the preference, and that's something to think about and to just honestly ask yourself if it's something you're comfortable with or not, and maybe you might be and the birth parent may not be, so you have to be flexible in that regard as well. So as we continue on, so you've chosen an agency. They're probably going to have you put together some kind of a Snapfish type photo album that kind of shares the story of you and your family, maybe why you want to adopt, and you can kind of think about what your story is and then put that into a simple Snapfish photo book online with some pictures and get that published. And for us, Bethany, when we were in North Carolina, had 3 different offices across the state, and so we made 3 copies of that book, and 1 copy went to each of the offices. And so when they were matching, when they had a birth parent or parents come in that were interested in adoptive families, if they got some of the vibes or some of the thought process of those parents or parent, then they would show them the photo albums of the families that may have matched better with what they were looking for. And then also the same thing, they would take the needs of the adopted families, as in us, and they would only show those if it met the criteria that we were looking for. And so then the birth families get a chance to take a look at you and see more about you and your families, and then it gives them a chance to kind of get a little bit more thought process as to whether or not you might be a good fit for what they're thinking for their child as well. And so it's kind of a two-way street in conversation and something to think about as you put that together. Not really hard. It's actually kind of fun, and it makes a good gift for other family members as well as a good table conversation at your own house when folks come by. So that's your photo album.
And yeah, I want to just share a couple things really quick. The cool thing about Braden's adoption, let me just share this really quick, is his birth mom was living in Virginia, a half hour from where we were living. And 4 days before he was born, she moved to Delaware. And so that kind of caused a little bit of a, like, what do we do now? Because we were supposed to be there for the delivery. I was going to help with the delivery. I don't even know what I was going to do, but so we missed the delivery. She thought she was having a girl. So we get a call. I was at church and was told that Braden was already born, that he was a boy, and that he was 10-1. I was like, holy cow, this is a big kid. Anyway, so we had to pack very quickly and get to the hospital. We ended up in Delaware near Dover Air Force Base. And the amazing thing is how God provided. It ended up that we had friends from college who came to visit us in the hospital. We had, I think, another set of friends from college visit us in the hospital. And then one of those friends ended up having us for dinner, and we got to talk to them about adoption. And since our adoption, they've adopted too as well. Then there was an Air Force family who happened to be out of town. And they let us stay in their home. Instead of staying in a motel, they let us stay in their home because now that since Braden's birth mom left the state and crossed state lines, there's a thing called interstate adoption paperwork. So basically after Braden was born, we had to stay in Delaware for 3 weeks. We could have been in a motel for 3 weeks, which would not have been fun. We got to stay in an Air Force family's house. She was out of the house visiting family. He was deployed. Another family brought us dinner. My parents and my brother's family, they were only an hour and a half away. They got to come see Braden a lot sooner than coming down to Virginia. So many God things happened because of that move. So my encouragement is sometimes things might change a little bit during your adoption. A birth mom might move or something might happen, but, God's got something in that, and he's going to do something great. And it was really cool to be able to just watch God open these amazing doors and us just kind of like take it all in. But it was a little scary, I'll be honest, because his birth mom could have changed her mind. And so every day that went by, I think we had, 10 days? 10 days until her rights were terminated?
Yes.
Let me tell you, every day was precious. Every day was precious with that little boy because at any moment she could have changed her mind. So I remember when that 10th day happened, we were like, oh my goodness, like he's ours. Like this is, so that was such an exciting time.
That's also a good point as well because different states have different policies. And so when a birth parent signs the relinquishment paperwork that says they relinquish their rights for taking the child back from the adoption process, certain states have a certain amount of time, whether it's 3 or 5 type of days, or sometimes there's a policy that says it's so many days from birth or so many days from the date that the parents sign that relinquishment letter, whichever comes later. So it may actually be longer than that. And that's called an at-risk placement. And your agency will advise you whether they're comfortable with the situation, whether they risk the risk placement should take place, or you might want to put the child. They have the agencies will have a foster care program for the newborn or for the child until that risk is passed on, and then you can take the child with no risk at all. Again, that's a personal preference. For us, we trusted our social workers very well.
They become like your best friend almost.
They do. And they said basically that we would not advise you to take a child with the risk placement if we were concerned that the parent might come back and change their mind.
We need to talk about risk placement. Yep. Yeah, we did take Braden home after the hospital knowing that his birth mom could have changed her mind. We did the same thing with Ella Marie. It is a risk. That is something that you and your husband, you and your wife have to talk about and have to be okay with. And your social worker, as knowledgeable and as insightful as they are, no one truly knows what that birth mom is going to do, okay? Your social worker will do the best she can to help you through that, but ultimately the birth mom will make that decision one way or the other. Now moving on to Ella Marie's adoption, okay? So we went through the same agency, Bethany Christian Services, 2 different states, and they run their program 2 separate ways. With Braden, we were thrown into a waiting pool at number 10, and then we ended up bumping down to number 8 when Braden was adopted. So in that situation, there was an order once you were in the waiting pool. With Ella Marie, it was like a big free-for-all. It was like one big waiting pool, and the birth moms got to look at any profile book that they wanted to. There was no order. So they could say, hey, we want to see people who already have a child at home. Like we had Braden at home already. We want a sibling for our baby, or we want someone, that's military, whatever. So each agency might run things a little differently if you're working with the same agency. But with Ella Marie's, we were more, I think, open with the open adoption plan just because of the situation with our birth parents, and just for their privacy's sake. We're not going to get into too many details, but we just, I don't know, sometimes you just know that this is what you're supposed to do. I don't know how to explain it, but we just knew that this was a good situation to do with them, to have an open plan with them.
It's almost like that just connection, like kind of when we were looking to think about getting engaged, and we asked somebody that we trust and respect the question, well, how do you know? And her response was, you just know. And so for us, that was kind of where things were at with our placement for our daughter. And it was fantastic. And then the same thing there. We had to travel 5 hours across the state from Fayetteville, North Carolina, up to the mountains near Asheville. And lo and behold, one of our dear friends and mentors and his wife lived in that same town, just minutes from where we were having our meeting with the Bethany office. And so we literally met our birth parents and had an amazing time with them, and then got a chance to literally go just a few miles up the road to dinner with some of the folks that I've known for almost 20 years.
Yeah, and then we had Air Force friends visit us. Actually, Amber's on here. Amber saw us in Delaware. Yeah, so like God opened all these doors for us to be in the middle of nowhere, and people that we knew come by and just love on us.
And literally, even at the hospital in that situation, we had friends that were traveling through, going back to the Northeast, just happened to be in that area for a wedding that weekend, and they were able to come see us at the hospital. And the same thing with our friends. He's a retired chaplain and also a mentor, that he and his wife were able to come see us in the hospital, as well as the birth families, both families, relatives. It was just amazing, and it was almost like a family reunion with people we'd just met, and it was just fantastic.
Like, Rachel had a question. We went through Bethany Christian Services with both of our adoptions. With Ella Marie's, oh my goodness, I don't know how to explain this all to you, but we got there like dog tired because we got the call in the middle of the night that she came very quickly. Drove to Walmart at like 5, 6 in the morning to buy diapers. We didn't even have diapers and wipes yet. Get to the hospital, and we are instantly loved on by these two birth parents, their parents, aunts and uncles, friends, and they just, I'm telling you, it was amazing. Like, they would sit down and play cards with my son, and then they would just come in and sit and talk. They prayed over us. I don't know how to explain it. That's not always normal. Every adoption is going to be different, but we have the most amazing birth parents, and their families are amazing. And the nurses were great in both of our adoption situations, explaining to us exactly what to do, because it's not like I had all these classes, to know how to take care of a baby. Like, I think pregnant women get a lot of classes and stuff, but
Not to mention, the beauty of it is there's no labor pains, no stretch marks, and
I didn't have to lose weight afterwards.
Didn't have to lose weight. I gained some weight probably, but there's some benefits to the adoption process as well in that regard.
I want to talk really quick about the emotional aspect of these two adoptions. I'll be honest. The hardest part of the whole thing was the day that we said goodbye to our birth moms, knowing that there was a possibility of seeing them again. Braden's mom, we weren't sure, but Ella Marie's mom, we knew we'd see them again. But there's just something final about them handing over that baby and you hugging them goodbye. It's very surreal. It's very heartbreaking. I cried both times, probably harder with Ella Marie's birth parents, just because I bonded with them probably a little deeper. But it's okay to grieve. It's okay to grieve the loss for the birth parents, and that was hard.
It is a loss. It's a loss. It's a gain for some in some ways, but it's also a huge loss for the family who is placing their child for adoption, and for their extended families as well. And we maybe didn't have an idea as to how much that was until we have walked down this pathway. And it's definitely something that you need to be prepared for. Emotionally, that's a piece as well. One of the questions somebody had asked us about was, why is it so costly? And that's the $1 million question, no pun intended. Perplexed in my mind as to how somebody can have an abortion with no paperwork, no parental consent, and maybe no costs included or incurred, or very minimal, yet to adopt a child by somebody who's willing to do so, from somebody who's willing to place the child, can cost so much, take so much time and so much paperwork and energy. It really is the $1 million question, and I don't have a good answer for you. I wish I did. I do know this, for me particularly, I think Wendy maybe not as much, but the financial piece was my last stronghold before I thought that we could go final with the idea of even pursuing adoption. One of our relatives who has adopted from another country basically said this. He says, do we trust God even with our finances in this type of a situation? And he further said, if we can invest in a home and take a loan on it, if we can invest in a car, which is not really a good investment because it doesn't appreciate very much, and take a loan on it and pay it down, we can, if you have the extra monies to buy a boat or a jet ski or something fun, motorcycle, whatever hobbies or vacations you might like to do at that expense. He says, how much more so would the life and the eternity of a child and their family's heritage for the rest of their lives be? And it might mean you might have to take an adoption loan. There are adoption loans out there. You might have to take a loan. You might have to sacrifice some things. It's a sacrifice, I'm not going to lie. But how precious is the life of a child, and how precious is the fact that, Lord willing, that child will come to have faith in Christ and have an eternity with God. You can't put a price tag on that. And so for me, once he said that, it was like the last straw broke, and I was jumped in with both feet and ready to go, and no regrets.
And for us, it wasn't just our children. We've invested into their birth families, and they've invested into us. So we've developed these friendships and these relationships and ministry with them that we would have never had if it wasn't for our children. So I always tell people adoption is a ministry, because you are investing into a child's life for eternity, because Lord willing, they'll come to Christ, and you're able to share this with other people like we're doing right now. Like, this is ministry right here, us sharing with you what God has done with us through our loss of pregnancy and loss of getting pregnant. Like, this is what God led us to ultimately. What was I going to say? I had another thought. Go ahead.
Somebody was saying that our video feed may have frozen up.
Oh, did it freeze?
I apologize.
Can you tell us if you can still see? Can anybody comment?
If you can still see us and it's not frozen, because we're seeing ourselves and it's not, I think we're good, and I still see people popping on here.
Can you guys still see us?
Can you still see us? If not, we'll still post when we're done, and we'll just continue on.
Okay, so costly. Yeah, we don't have all the answers for that. I know that some birth moms will ask for money for medical expenses. That's something you just sit down and talk with your social worker about. I know there's some expenses, for the social worker, for other stuff, but we don't have all the answers to that. I know that.
Go ahead.
I know that you can. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. I know that some people adopt through the state, or go through foster care to adopt. So that's free as far as I know. So if some of you are wanting to adopt, you can do through the foster care system.
And then there are a lot of options for grants. There are lots of ways to
we did grants for Braden.
For fundraising. So you can offset the cost. It's amazing how many people want to help both family and friends when they hear you want to adopt, to be able to help you offset the costs. And ultimately, it's something that if God's called you to do it, as trivial and as trite as the phrase might sound, He's going to provide for you. Downstairs, I have 2 spreadsheets. I have a spreadsheet that I've made up for each of the adoption processes to keep a track of, literally to the penny, of everything we spent, whether it was for mailing paperwork, for fingerprint fees, for adoption agency fees, for legal fees, whatever it might be.
Can you explain how the tax credit thing works?
Sure.
I don't know if it still works now, but can you explain how?
We can definitely ask the question, and I'll explain it. But basically, we track the monies that we put out, and literally between the monies we'd gotten back from grants or from tax returns or those types of things, it literally broke down that it came to almost the penny that we paid for the cost for each of the adoptions that we got back. Granted, it took the course of a few years, and I don't know if it's still available because I haven't looked, but when we were doing our adoptions, there was a tax credit available that actually allowed us to receive back certain amounts of money per year of qualifying adoption costs, which were basically all of them, until we met a certain cap. I think the last time we did it, the cap was about $13,000. So that was a big help. But don't let that number scare you. Don't let the adoption costs scare you. The money is not all due at one time in the front. You pay certain things for the initial training. You pay certain things for, like, say, your Snapfish photo albums and those types of things. But then you have all that time to save. And it may be a few years, honestly. It could be shorter than that. But you have time to save those funds up, and then that'll help offset some of your costs as well. And so, for us, it took a trip to Iraq for one adoption and Afghanistan for the other. Ironically, we had deployments in that process, and for me, that was where we saved a lot of money. But there are lots of ways you can save if you put your mind to it. Yeah,
and our costs were totally different between both agencies. We talked about how, even though we went through Bethany Christian Services
in both states,
and how their waiting pools were different. Also, financially, how much we paid was different. Braden was a lot cheaper, and also because Cliff was deployed 4 of those months, Bethany looked at the taxable income. So basically, Cliff it looked like Cliff only worked for 8 months or made, had taxable income off of 8 months. So it put us in a different bracket. So with our adoption with Braden, it went by like pay. Like the more you made, you'd be in a higher bracket. The less you made, you'd be in a lower bracket.
And
So it looked like
they would use grants internally to help offset some of those costs based on the cost bracketing that they had put together for their agencies.
And then we applied for Shohana's Hope, which is Stephen Curtis Chapman's grant agency. The military gave us money back and the government. So pretty much by the time Braden's adoption was done, we got pretty much all that money back, and we were able to pour that money into Ella Marie's. Ella Marie's, we didn't get any grants. We did a fundraiser, but it didn't bring in a lot, but God just was gracious to us.
Some agencies will also work with you as far as for the grants as well, but then there's also some employers will work with you regarding both maternity and or paternity leave. They might call it adoption leave. You might have some employers, both federal and private, that will offer adoption income support in a sense of like a grant or something that they would help offer. And that's something you could always ask your employer about as well. And you could even use the thought process of, hey, you're not having to pay for any of my hospital fees for giving birth. Maybe you could help us with a little bit towards the cost of our adoption. And honestly, again, it's surprising how many folks wanted to partner with us in that regard. There are fundraisers you can do through ministries that support selling T-shirts or coffee or artwork. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And again, the sky's the limit based on what your creativity is or what your thought process is with your friends and family.
Laura asked earlier today when I posted about us doing this live, she said, what do most people not know about adoption that you wish they did know? I don't know what answers you have. I wrote down some answers. The thing I wish people knew is that you can truly bond with that child, even though they are not born from you. We bonded instantly with both of our kids. We didn't have any problems. I mean, I know that's not true probably for everybody, but you can bond. And our children have always just felt like they were always naturally ours.
I think
it's never felt weird.
No,
or anything
not
like
for
that.
us. Well, I don't think even for extended family. And I think there might be some extended
Right.
families that would say, but if you have a child who's adopted, it may not feel the same for you as the adoptive parent or parents, or they might have concerns that they may not feel natural for them. But
I know international adoptions, I know are
there's some
harder.
struggles. It can
Yeah.
be, but it's not always. And so for us, we've not had that experience. It's just been as natural as can be. In fact, the ironic part, even this past Saturday night after church, when we were talking with a family after church and mentioned about adoption, they looked at us kind of like we had three heads, and
They had no
they had
clue.
no idea because they said, but they look just like you, and so that's just a God thing.
Everybody says they look like you.
Braden with
Your good looks, your bald head.
good look and his bald head, but you just never know. And if they look nothing like you, if God's called you to do it, who cares? It's awesome, and do it. And we've got friends who have adopted literally from multiple countries. One of the friends, our friend's son was on here earlier from Bulgaria. We've got friends who have adopted from Africa and from Europe, and we've had friends adopt from other places across culturally in this country. The sky's the limit. If God's leading you to do it, man, I cannot encourage you enough just to jump in with both feet and then and prepare for the ride. Definitely buckle in. But it's amazing. It's an amazing adventure. It's an amazing journey, and it's definitely a faith building process.
What else would you say? What do most people not know about adoption that you wish they did know?
Sometimes it can take a long time.
Sometimes it can take a short time.
Sometimes it can take a short time as well.
We've had friends that didn't even finish the home study yet, and they got a call saying you need to finish it fast because there is a baby waiting for you.
Sometimes, even when working with an agency, they're going to encourage you to keep your feelers out, so that if there's somebody that comes into your life that may be looking to make an adoption decision, that you're able to help make that connection. That also can speed the process up. Obviously, you talk to your immediate and extended family about that, your friends, your social media connections, and those types of things. That it kind of expands your radar in a sense as to folks who may be aware that you're looking to adopt, and that may open up some processes that may not have been there originally, and that may happen over the course of the time you're in the official quote-unquote waiting pool. But some of the things that you may not know about adoption.
I was gonna say one, like I hear this a lot that it's adoption's a risk, and what if the birth mom changes her mind, or pregnancy is a risk, right? When you all are pregnant, anything can happen, right? But you still pursue trying to get pregnant because that's what God's called you to, or that's what you feel like is the next step for your family. Just like adoption and just like a pregnancy, if you were to get pregnant right now, like there is a risk no matter what. And I think the thing is there's just so many excuses you can make, but if you don't try to pursue it, you'll never know, you know?
I think something else that, in just kind of wrapping this process up for tonight, one other thing I think that people don't know, and I think a lot of people misunderstand or misconstrue, we as adoptive parents are not heroes. We didn't save anybody. We didn't rescue anything. We're just two people who have gone down life's road, and
we're not rich.
We're not rich, definitely not rich.
I think people think we have like tons of money.
Yeah,
no, we pretty much
the money tree hasn't started to spring its roots in yet.
We poured our money from Braden to Ella Marie, and we pretty much got broke after Ella Marie.
But you know what? God has met our needs, and even in a transition from a very stable employment in the military to where we are now, that's still stable, but we didn't know at the time what that transition was going to be like. God still met the needs, and I can't stress that enough. If He's calling you to this process, do not let anything stand in your way. Do not let anybody stand in your way. That would be a naysayer, somebody who's trying to stop you from following what God's called you to do. So with that, I think that's some of the thoughts that we had and answer some of the questions that we had received earlier. And again, as always, please check out our Facebook group. It's MIA to Hope Ministry, the Miscarriage, Infertility, and Adoption to Hope Ministry, MIA to Hope. And then from there, you can also link to our website. We hope that you have a great evening, and thank you for the time you've invested in just hanging out with us tonight and on the other couple of times this month. We really appreciate you, and we pray that these simple words and simple videos will help not only you, but others that may be in this process and provide strength and encouragement. And as always, reach out to us. Let us know what questions you might have.
Write questions down here or send us messages.
We're more than happy to answer questions privately. We'd be happy to meet with you, as people did for us for our adoption process, to kind of help us learn the ropes. And so we just want to be that open book and pay it forward. So with that, we'll sign off for the night. God bless you, and take care.